What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to The Haunted Beard. Thank you for joining me. So I just kicked off a brand new franchise series of reviews with Texas Chainsaw Massacre and just dropped my review on the original. Be sure to check out that video if you haven't yet. And today I'm giving you my review for Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. So this came out 12 years later in 1986, and this was actually a first-time watch for me. Never seen it before, and I knew going in that this was going to be something different. I was aware that Tobe Hooper shot this as more intentionally so as more of a dark comedy. So I kind of had those expectations going in. So I was very curious to see how he was going to pull that off and if any of the comedy would translate. So let's get into my thoughts. So the film opens up, gives you a little bit of text on the screen, giving you just kind of filling in some of the gap between the events of the first film and the second film. We understand that Sally is catatonic. She's in some sort of hospital. No evidence was ever uncovered of any of the murders. And so Leatherface and the family are still out there and at large. Now, the film immediately establishes a drastically different tone. As it opens up, you've got these two young, college-age guys cruising down the highway and causing all sorts of ruckus. They're just these two rich, obnoxious guys. One of them's got a gun and is shooting road signs, and they're just being complete idiots. And so right from the get-go, we know we're in for something completely different. You got this like pop rock song playing over the top of it, and it's just already completely different than the original film. They end up calling into the radio station, and we're introduced to really our main protagonist, Stretch. And they're having a conversation, and it turns out Leatherface finds these guys on the road, and there's this huge sequence on the bridge where the two guys in the car are trying to escape Leatherface, and he ends up killing them. And so for the first 10 minutes, it really shows how different this film is going to be. It's a very just kind of wacky, goofy, ridiculous, over-the-top type of movie. And after the first 10 minutes, I was like, okay, I went in with that expectation. All right, we're going to get something a little bit different here. Let's see what happens. And for the most part, that opening scene, it works pretty good. I like the bridge scene. I like the kill. You get sort of a decapitation of one of the guys. It's fun. It's ridiculous. And so I was kind of on board, and I was like, all right, I might have some fun with this. Right after this, we're introduced to Dennis Hopper's character, Lieutenant Enright, who is the uncle. I believe he's the uncle of Sally and Franklin, their characters from the first movie. And I have to say, I was not too impressed with Dennis Hopper in this movie, unfortunately. I've seen a handful of his work. He's usually quite good. And I just feel like he didn't really fit in with the movie. He just didn't vibe well with it. And at the beginning of the film, he's very serious. Whereas, the rest of the movie is trying to be this over-the-top kind of goofy type of, tone to it. And he's just very serious. And he's almost like so serious to where the rest of the film is trying to be funny, but he is so serious, he almost comes off as like unintentionally funny. And I don't know, it just didn't jive with me. And then you get to his character later on in the movie, and I'll talk more about it in a minute, but during the whole climactic sequence with him under the cave, he turns into this like prophet of doom, and he acts like he's like delivering Shakespeare dialogue on some sort of stage theater play. And it just did not really work for me at all. There's this weird scene earlier on in the movie, too, where Dennis Hopper goes into this store and he buys these chainsaws. And he doesn't say a single word to the guy who's selling them. And then he goes out and like tests them on this giant log. And it's just this awkward, weird, odd scene, and I didn't really know like what to make of it. And so I don't know if it's like supposed to be funny or just what exactly Hooper was going for in the scene. It was all just kind of awkward and weird, and Hopper doesn't really sell whatever he's trying to do. Oh, my kiss banana. So what ends up happening is Stretch, the radio DJ, actually has an audio recording of the opening kill scene, the murder of those two guys. She has it on a cassette tape. And she ends up connecting with Dennis Hopper, trying to say, hey, I can help you. I have the recording of this murder here. He initially turns her away. He's like, I don't want anybody else's help. But then eventually he comes around and they kind of team up a little bit. Then we find out that old man from the first film, he is Drayton Sawyer. We find out his name. And he has been spending the last however many years doing these chili cook-off contests and is just mopping up the competition because he has a secret ingredient that he puts in the chili. And of course, it's supposed to be darkly comedic because the secret ingredient is, of course, people and human flesh. And so anyways, that's how he's been spending his time. Not long after this, we get what I think is the best scene in the entire movie, as Stretch plays the audio recording of the murders on the radio. And then we are introduced to Chop Top.
You're my fave. Me and Bubba, my little brother, we listen to you every night.
And yes, I think he is the best thing about this movie, and his introduction scene is the best scene in the entire film. Bill Moseley in this role is pretty great. He's definitely the best thing about the movie. And I think what works best about his character and his performance is he's just a good balance between this kind of wacky, zany, darkly comedic, and also this really genuinely creepy, disturbing, twisted person. And so there's just kind of a nice balance. There is some dark humor to it, but there's also some this guy is whacked out sort of. And so I just kind of like how you get both of those elements fused together with his character. And his character introduction's great. He's very unnerving, very off-putting. The little detail that they have with him lighting the end of the hanger on fire and scratching his head is hilarious and pretty great. A nice little detail that I thought worked quite well. And it's just a really good scene. You really kind of get to savor this moment. It goes on for, I don't know, it feels like 4 or 5 minutes, and you're not really sure where it's leading. At one point, you think he might be leaving, but then he doesn't, and you don't know, is he going to just, attack Stretch and just kill her? But the payoff to this kind of buildup is great as he goes into the dark room and flips the lights on, and there's Leatherface in what I thought was genuinely a pretty great little jump scare as Leatherface jumps out of the dark room and the chase is on. Stretch takes off running with Leatherface right behind her. And so, yeah, it's definitely the best sequence in the entire film. I had quite a bit of fun with that scene.
And maybe the new music's...
Unfortunately, though, that kind of leads into what I think is one of the big negatives of the movie, and that is there is this sexual component between Leatherface and Stretch, and there's this scene between both of them that is, it's just gross, and I just really could have done without it, and it just doesn't really need to be in there. And it's not just this scene, because this scene influences later scenes in the movie, because they kind of establish here that Leatherface takes a liking to Stretch and has feelings for her in a way, which ends up affecting some of the events later on in the movie to where he's now almost protecting her from harm and from danger, and he no longer feels like this threatening presence, particularly more towards the ending and the climactic sequence of the movie. He just feels like this love-struck, bumbling idiot. And so I really just kind of hated that decision. I thought that was a really terrible direction to take the film in, and I really could have done without that entire component to this movie. Anyways, Leatherface lets Stretch live, and him and Chop Top get out of there. They take LG, one of the other guys who works at the radio station. They put him in the bed of the pickup truck and take off back to their house, headquarters, cave, whatever you want to call it. Stretch ends up following them, and then Lieutenant Enright shows up. This scene was really weird, though, because it's filmed in such a way that presents Enright like this threat, like he's chasing her down with his car, where all he would have had to do is lean his head out the window and be like, hey, it's just me. Don't worry. I'm not trying to run you over with my car. So I thought that was a really weird way to kind of film and edit that sequence. Anyways, Stretch ends up falling down this tunnel into the underground cave. Enright ends up finding the entrance to the underground lair as well. And the whole set design here is kind of fun. Again, it's very kind of over dramatic, very theatrical and over the top sort of thing. But I enjoyed it for the most part. I thought it was kind of a cool just a cool way to sort of change things up a little bit and make things just kind of bigger and a little more, I don't know, crazy and over the top, I guess. But again, here, Dennis Hopper just does some stuff that I thought was just kind of stupid. And like, he's like, okay, this is the devil's playground. And, I got to destroy all the evil and everything. So, he starts taking his chainsaw and starts cutting through all these support beams. And it's like, dude, you're gonna bring down the entire cave on top of yourself. Like, I don't know what he's thinking here. I don't know what he's doing. It was just kind of dumb. I did quite enjoy one of the next scenes, though, where Stretch ends up getting found out by Leatherface, and she sees Leatherface skinning LG. And I like the scene where he cuts LG's face off and puts it on Stretch, and then LG is somehow still awake after this horrific beating he takes from Chop Top earlier in the movie. And I just thought it was so twisted and really disturbed, but kind of funny, where he comes to and sees Stretch wearing his face. And yeah, I don't know. I got a kick out of that scene. I thought that was a highlight of the movie. I quite enjoyed that scene. So the film plays out, Stretch is just trying to escape, and so there's a lot of chasing, cat and mouse type thing, so to speak. And then we get another dinner scene where Stretch gets captured, she gets tied to a chair, just like Sally does in the first film. I thought this was just kind of an odd decision, because clearly Hooper here is trying to establish that this movie is different, right? It's a completely different tone and all that. And I just thought it was weird that he chose to basically do the exact same thing as the original film. And it's like, why would you want to make this movie so different and yet have a scene here that you would so directly compare to that original movie, where the original movie is just so much better? And I understand he's not really going for the horror and the scares here as much, but I don't know. I didn't really like the scene. It's obviously nowhere near as effective or scary as the original. It's not really funny at all. It's just kind of like, yeah, we've seen this, and I don't know, it just kind of fell flat to me, I guess.
Please don't hoodoo the boy. Hey, Grandpa, here's the big boy.
Then we get a little bit of a showdown between Enright and Leatherface. They have this chainsaw fight, which again, just this very ridiculous, over-the-top type thing. It's kind of fun, I guess. Leatherface ends up getting impaled. We get some gnarly blood and gore and stuff like that. So that was kind of fun. And then you get like sort of the final climactic scene with Chop Top chasing Stretch up out of the cave into this, like, I don't know, tall tower. And then we see Mother sitting in this throne. But the film ends on really like the exact same note as the first film, where this time, instead of Leatherface waving the chainsaw around and all that stuff, this time it's Stretch. And so I guess technically the good guys win in this movie, and then it ends. And so overall, it's just kind of a middle of the road type movie for me. There are a handful of moments that I quite enjoy. Like I said, Bill Moseley as Chop Top is pretty great, and I quite enjoyed his character. That whole scene where he's at the radio station is pretty solid stuff. I quite enjoyed it. You do get a couple pretty decent kills. There's some of the humorous aspect of it that lands fairly well, but most of it for me is just kind of middle of the road. A lot of the humor doesn't really land. Not a big fan of Dennis Hopper's character. There's not really much suspense and tension here throughout most of it. And I really didn't like the whole like sexual love aspect sort of thing they did with Leatherface and his feelings towards Stretch. Just didn't really like that at all. So yeah, it's just kind of a mid-tier sort of thing, 5 out of 10 type of movie. Yeah, anyways, those are my thoughts. Hit me up down below though. Would love to hear your guys' opinions and thoughts on this one, especially since, I mean, it's amazing how drastically different it is from that original film. And I was trying to think of like, are there other films in franchises that are so different, like between one film to the next? Like, I know the Nightmare on Elm franchise eventually kind of got more silly, but that was more of a gradual thing. Whereas this is such a drastic shift between just one film to the next movie. I don't know if there's any other franchises that have such a drastic shift like that. But anyways, yeah, those are my thoughts. Hit me up down below. That's all I got for you. If you got something out of this video, please do me a favor and do not click that subscribe button unless you want to be haunted by the beard.